Hector. That's it!
At 81, Kevin Hector represents one of football's saddest truths. A player can give everything to the game and still never receive the recognition he deserves. Because Kevin Hector did not fail. He won league titles, he played in Europe, he wore the England shirt, he became one of Derby County's greatest ever players. Yet today, his name is rarely mentioned among the giants of his generation. That is the tragedy. Not a lack of success, a lack of recognition. While others became football mythology, Kevin Hector slowly became one of the game's most overlooked legends. Years later, Hector simply reflected, "I've had a wonderful life in football. No bitterness, no anger. Just the words of a man who gave everything to the game." Perhaps that is football's biggest regret. History remembers the miracle, but it does not always remember the men who made the miracle possible. And before the trophies, before England, before Brian Clough, there was a young striker in Bradford becoming one of the most feared goal scorers in the country. A journey was beginning, one that would make him a legend, but not a legend football would remember loudly enough. Before we continue, subscribe, and let's keep the memories of football's golden generation alive together. Football's biggest regret did not begin at Derby County. It began years earlier, when a young striker was quietly scoring goals, while much of the football world looked elsewhere. Kevin Hector was building a reputation at Bradford Park Avenue, not through headlines, not through publicity, through goals, lots of them. Defenders struggled to contain him. Supporters knew his value, and it was only a matter of time before bigger clubs came calling. Manchester City showed interest. Other clubs were watching closely, but Derby County acted. Chairman Sam Longson watched Hector repeatedly and became convinced he was exactly what the club needed. Derby paid a significant fee to bring him to the baseball ground. At the time, it felt like a gamble. In reality, it would become one of the smartest decisions in the club's history. Hector was not a loud personality. He did not chase attention. He preferred letting his football do the talking. That quiet nature would stay with him throughout his career, and perhaps it would later become one reason his achievements never received the recognition they deserved. The moment he arrived at Derby, something clicked. Supporters saw a player willing to run, fight, and carry responsibility. The connection formed quickly. There was a feeling that this young striker belonged. Nobody was talking about titles. Nobody was talking about England. Nobody was talking about club records. They simply knew Derby had found a goalscorer. What they did not know was that they had also found one of the greatest players the club would ever produce. And waiting just around the corner was the man who would change Derby County forever. When Brian Clough arrived at Derby County, he did not discover Kevin Hector. That is one of football's biggest misconceptions. Hector was already there, already scoring, already proving his value. What Clough recognised was how important he could become. Together with Peter Taylor, Clough transformed the atmosphere around the club. Standards rose, belief grew, expectations changed. Players who had once hoped to compete were suddenly being told they could win. Kevin Hector was one of the men at the centre of that transformation. His partnership with John O'Hare became one of Derby's most important weapons. O'Hare brought strength. Hector brought movement. O'Hare occupied defenders. Hector punished them. It was a partnership built on trust and understanding, and it helped turn Derby into a serious force. While Clough dominated the headlines, Hector quietly kept doing what he did best: scoring goals, creating problems, winning matches. There was no drama about him, no need for attention. His football spoke loudly enough. As Derby continued to rise, supporters started believing something extraordinary was possible. The club was changing, the expectations were changing, and Kevin Hector was becoming one of the most important players in Derby County's future. The greatest years of his career were approaching, and soon, the baseball ground would become his kingdom. The rise happened faster than many expected. Under Brian Clough and Peter Taylor, Derby County stopped thinking like underdogs. They started thinking like champions. And Kevin Hector was right at the heart of it. Week after week, he delivered goals, work rate, consistency, the qualities every successful team depends upon. Supporters trusted him, teammates trusted him, and opponents quickly learned how dangerous he could be. John O'Hare later described Hector as an electric player: the pace, the movement, the ability to appear in the right place at exactly the right moment. Defenders could lose sight of him for a second. That was often enough. As Derby climbed through English football, the baseball ground became one of the most difficult places to visit. The crowd expected success. The team believed in success. And Kevin Hector kept helping turn that belief into reality. Then came the moment supporters had dreamed about. The 1971-72 season. Against the odds, Derby County became champions of England. It remains one of the greatest achievements in the club's history. For the supporters, it felt impossible. For the players, it felt unforgettable. And for Kevin Hector, it was the reward for years of commitment and sacrifice. Yet the story did not end there. Because while many footballers spend their entire careers chasing one great season, Derby wanted more, and Hector was not finished. The biggest opportunity of his career was still ahead of him. An opportunity that would take him from the baseball ground to the England national team. Unfortunately, it would also become one of the most painful moments of his life. By 1973, Kevin Hector had earned his chance. He was a league champion, one of Derby County's most important players, a striker performing at the highest level of English football. England finally called, but the opportunity never arrived the way it should have. Instead of building a career around him, England gave him only brief chances to prove himself, and those chances came at the worst possible moment. The most painful arrived at Wembley. England against Poland, a World Cup place hanging in the balance. The pressure was enormous. The entire country was watching. As the match slipped away, Alf Ramsey turned to Kevin Hector. Not at the beginning, not at half-time. Late, very late, England were desperate. Time was disappearing. And suddenly, Hector found himself thrown into one of the biggest moments in English football history. Then came the chance. The moment that still lingers around his England story. In the closing moments, Hector rose for an opportunity that might have changed everything. Some accounts describe the effort being cleared off the line. Others remember it drifting agonizingly wide. Either way, the outcome was the same. The chance was gone. England failed to qualify for the 1974 World Cup. The nation focused on disappointment, the blame, the shock, and Kevin Hector's England career never truly recovered. 2 appearances, no proper run in the team, no real opportunity to establish himself. For many players, international football becomes the place where their reputation grows. For Hector, it became the place where possibilities disappeared. That is what makes the story so painful. Not because he failed England, but because England never truly gave him the chance to succeed. And while one door was quietly closing, another chapter was already beginning at Derby. One that would prove Kevin Hector was far more than simply a Brian Clough player. In October 1973, Derby County changed forever. Brian Clough and Peter Taylor were gone. For many people, it felt like the end of Derby's golden era. But Kevin Hector was still there, and that matters, because football history often gives all the credit to managers, while the players slowly disappear into the background. Hector refused to disappear. When Dave Mackay took charge, many expected Derby to decline. Instead, the club continued fighting at the top. The goals kept coming, the performances remained, and Hector stayed at the heart of it all. Then came another incredible achievement, the 1974-75 First Division title. A second championship in 4 seasons, and this one arrived after Clough had left. That proved something important. Kevin Hector was not simply part of Brian Clough's success. He was one of the foundations of it. Without Clough, Hector still delivered. Without Clough, Hector still helped Derby win the biggest prize in English football. Yet history rarely remembers it that way. The manager became the legend. The players were left in the shadows, and Kevin Hector was one of them. Football was already beginning to move on. And for the first time, the King's place at the centre of Derby's story was no longer guaranteed. Football can be cruel, not because greatness disappears, but because football eventually looks for someone new. As the years passed, Derby County began to change. New players arrived, new ideas arrived, and Kevin Hector was no longer the automatic choice he had once been. For a man who had given so much to the club, it was a difficult reality. The King was no longer untouchable. Eventually, a new chapter took him far from Derby, to Vancouver Whitecaps. For some players, that move would have marked the beginning of the end. Not for Kevin Hector. He kept scoring, he kept proving himself. He helped Vancouver win the Soccer Bowl in 1979, and once again showed the qualities that had made him such a special player. Even thousands of miles from Derby, the goals never completely left him, but home still mattered. And eventually, Hector returned to Derby County. The game had changed. The club had changed. Yet the connection between player and supporters remained. Then came a fitting final moment. In his last Derby appearance, Kevin Hector scored one final goal, one final memory, one final reminder of everything he had given to the club. Most players leave quietly. Kevin Hector left the only way he knew how, by finding the back of the net. But while his playing career was ending, another battle was beginning, the battle to be remembered. When Kevin Hector's playing days came to an end, the goals remained, the trophies remained, the records remained, but football moved on. And that is where the real sadness of this story begins. Because Kevin Hector achieved more than most footballers could ever dream of. He became a league champion, an England international, a European competitor, one of Derby County's greatest ever players. Yet somehow he never received the recognition his career truly deserved. Perhaps Rob McFarland explained it best when he described Hector as the quiet man of the team. And maybe that was the problem. Football often remembers the loudest voices. Kevin Hector was never one of them. He simply turned up, worked hard, scored goals, and helped build one of the greatest eras in Derby County history. While others became football mythology, Hector slowly became one of the game's most overlooked legends. The regret does not belong to Kevin Hector. It belongs to football, because history remembered the miracle, history remembered the manager, but it never fully remembered the quiet striker who helped make it all possible. Yet in Derby, the story never disappeared. The supporters still remember, the memories still live on, and the name Kevin Hector still carries a special meaning, not just because of the goals, not just because of the trophies, but because loyalty like his has become rare. At 81, Kevin Hector remains what he has always been, Derby County's quiet king, a champion, a club legend, and one of the most underappreciated footballers of his generation. Perhaps football's biggest regret was never giving him the place in history he had already earned on the pitch. And for those who watched him play, there will always be one simple truth. There will only ever be one King Kevin. Subscribe, because some legends gave everything to football and deserve to be remembered for it.